As this is now part 4 in the series, I suggest you start with part 1. You can find the link in the description. In part 1, I talked about chunking information, about trance states and frames. In part 2, I talked about pacing and leading, how people are selfish, about the VAKOG modalities and submodalities, and Milton Erickson. In part 3, I talked about language patterns, spatial, temporal, and other presuppositional language, cause and effect and complex equivalence, grifters, energy healers, pattern interrupts and fractionation, storytelling and metaphor, and subjective validation. Now, back to cold reading. They'll also try to give you a vague "you are X," but at times you're the opposite. That way, you choose the one that fits, and you identify with it and accept it as true. As they're using things like the echo technique to get your attention, calling attention to a fact that is their pace, then giving you a vague, either a cold reading suggestion, using structure in a cause and effect presuppositional statement, your brain then picks it up as a belief. Cold reading can also involve memorizing lots of information about potential clients, or even researching their client before the meeting, so they can pace with truths that you assume they must have psychically received. They could use an empathic statement in terms of cold reading. If your face is red, if you're breathing fast and sweating, they might say something has got you really excited. What's got you so excited? Then you'll either agree or you'll correct them. Either way, confirmation bias will kick in and it will make the grifter correct. The beliefs and emotions are the primary filter, and they delete and distort information. So based on what I believe about my world, who I am in it, those are the filters that will colour the information that's presented to my conscious mind. So when I move through the world, interacting with people, I'll only pay attention to information that reinforces what's already going on inside my head. This confirmational bias can be coupled with the principle of the emotional refractory period. That is, when you have an emotional response, it usually lasts for around 20 minutes, and this alters our perceptual filters to perpetuate this emotional state. It's like the emotion has a life of its own. A common example of this would be when you have an argument and you get mad. Even when the argument is finished, if anyone says anything to you for roughly the next 20 minutes, it can set you off arguing again, as your perceptual filters have been predisposed. You'll see the world in a way that will only reinforce the state you're already in. This comes back to the grifter being a master at controlling the frame of any interaction through subtle misdirection and assorted influence techniques. To further understand this, we need to look at our basic brains: the reptilian brain, the limbic system, and the neocortex. In this situation, the reptilian brain is what controls us. It sorts for the main drives: food, reproduction, survival, fight or flight. When the reptilian brain is hit with a threat, for example, in the news we're constantly being told of how we're going to die from a virus, a war, global warming, etc., we have a visceral response, and this is then sent up all the way to the neocortex. This is the rational brain, the one that comes up with the reason for why we do things. This is where the ego is. This is the part of us that thinks that it's in control. The thing about the neocortex and its superiority complex is it gives us a reason for why we do, think, and believe the way that we do. But now you should have a little understanding of the structure of cause and effect and complex equivalence presuppositional language patterns, being the building blocks of our belief and our identity, and should start to be able to see how flawed this logic is. This is where neurolinguistic programming has developed the meta model, and this most basically involves asking questions like "how do you know?" again and again until you get an emotional response. And you'll soon see our beliefs, identity, and our reasons for doing things mainly consist of flawed logic that resulted as the neocortex rationalizing brain was trying to justify a base emotion that overwhelmed our reptilian brain. You can do a great deal of self-transformative work using the meta model to find the flaws in your logic, and then use the other language patterns to install superior beliefs. In neurolinguistic programming, they use the meta model to detect where you distort, delete, or made generalizations in your thinking. This happens due to the fact that at the sensory level, there's too much information to process, so we need to keep compressing it down to be able to understand the world. However, just like compressing a video into a smaller format, when you try to zoom in again, you've lost the detail. Now that you know a little about this, you can start to see how all the fear porn that's put out is intended to create a visceral emotional response in you, usually a survival one, or in marketing and advertising a sexual one. And then that emotional pace is followed by an add-on or suggestion, with some cause and effect or complex equivalence flawed logic, like if I buy this car, people will like me. If I take this drug, I'll be safe, I'll be happy. It's a way to control your frame and to change your perceptual filters and predispose you to accept a suggestion. And grifters will do this all the time. They might tell you that you're cursed, there's an evil spirit coming after you, you have a negative energy, and only they can dispel it. They tend to be masters of cognitive flow. This is a skill that, when learned, can make you more charismatic as a speaker and a writer. Like before, they'll be looking at your eye movements, wanting to get you to relax and slow your blinking, and anything that causes mental friction, that gets you to think, takes you out of this trance and gets you questioning. So some things they might do, by monitoring your speed of talking, they'll talk just a little bit faster, so you have to follow along, but not too fast that you lose what they're saying. They'll use descriptors first to remove any mental friction and force your brain to make the image they want. For example, if they were to say the dog that was green ran up the hill excitedly, your brain would have to keep stopping after each word to readjust the image to make it fit, and this would be too jarring and it would wake you from a trance. Instead, if they say the excited green dog ran up the hill, it would be much easier for your brain to comprehend. They might add in open loops. This involves telling a story and halfway through starting another story, then halfway through another story, then at the end coming back and finishing all the stories. This is effective because the mind is always looking for closure, and if the middle story has cause and effect, complex equivalence language with hidden installation in there, it'll get saved right into the brain when embedded in these set of loops. The brain tends to focus on and remember the first part of a story and the end of a story. Therefore, anything put in the middle tends to get installed with an amnesic barrier. The other influence technique people are most familiar with is embedded commands. This is how, whether you ask a question, make a statement, or give a command, your tone changes at the end. So by changing your tone, you can appear to be asking a question, but instead you're making a statement. These work, but you need around 20 or 30 embedded commands in a conversation for them to stack and to build up to have an effect. Another way that commands can be embedded is through ambiguity. This is an interesting neurological phenomena. We have what NLP calls a trans-derivational search. This means anytime we hear a word, our brain has to play all references to that word. We're only consciously aware of the appropriate meaning of that word in the context of our conversation, but unconsciously all references get played. An example of this in marketing would be them saying, "By now you can see this is the best car." We assume by now means by this moment in time, but our brain also hears buy now as in purchase now. The dating world uses this with sexual innuendo, insinuating one thing while meaning another. The phenomena of mirror neurons is another interesting one. It was observed when a monkey was hooked up to an EEG, and then when his trainer was eating a banana, the area of the monkey's brain that had lit up when he would eat the banana also lit up. This is an evolutionary trait that we all have. We use it to learn to speak, to walk, to interact through our mirror neurons and our proprioception. The thing is, most people are completely unaware of mirror neurons, but this can be used to advantage by watching a video of someone performing, for example, playing the guitar, and by watching them learning how to do it ourselves. However, when we're in rapport with another, through our mirror neurons, we're capable of experiencing the same emotional state. There must be times in your life where some people made you feel good just by being around them, and other people made you feel uncomfortable. This is usually because they were so uncomfortable in themselves that through the mirror neurons in rapport, you started to feel this too. This phenomena can be great when used to help to improve someone's mood, but it can also be used by the grifter, who through polarity emotional control drills can learn to feel an extreme emotion, and then when in rapport with you, they can project it over to you, and you start to feel that intense emotion. And like we learned earlier, when the reptilian brain experiences an emotional response, it then sends that signal up to the neocortex, the rational brain, which will have its perceptual filters changed, and this frame change will come up with whatever flawed logic that it needs or it's suggested by the grifter to make sense of the feeling that we're experiencing. The way we learn to become immune to this type of influence is to practice emotional polarity drills. For example, going from feeling sad for 2 minutes to a neutral state to feeling happy for 2 minutes, then to calm, to energized, to angry, to at peace. The greater the range of emotional states that we can be aware of and control within ourselves, the easier it is for us to notice when someone else is trying to influence our emotional state. The sociopath and the narcissist will try these type of emotional projection, frame control, influence techniques on you. So by learning to spot these, it's a good way to figure out who you should avoid. In the next part, I'm going to talk about cults, self-delusion, negatives, anchors, denial, pattern interrupts, and compliance. You'll find the link in the description. To learn about herbs, supplements, and natural treatment plans, check out my website.